Greetings, my friends. Please make certain that you are still subscribed to this channel because every day I'm hearing from other people that they have been unsubscribed without their knowledge by YouTube. And if you are not subscribed, please consider supporting this channel. We need you. Thank you. My friends, at long last I have seen Season 1 of The Mandalorian. At the time of its original release, I did not watch the show for a number of reasons. The first being I watched the pilot and did not find it sufficiently compelling to justify breaking with my principles and paying for Disney+, something I could not do after the horrible abuses of Kathleen Kennedy, Ruan Johnson, and Jar Jar Abrams, because Disney has not shown respect to either Star Wars or fans, and as you know, without respect, we reject. I steadfastly refuse to give Disney a dime until the sequel trilogy is decanonized, someone who knows their ass from a Sarlacc pit replaces Kennedy, and fans are treated with the respect they are due. However, thanks to a loyal viewer, I have been given access to Disney Plus without paying a dime to Disney. I have therefore watched Season 1 of The Mandalorian, and here is my review. I'm going to cut to the chase here, people. I really liked this show, and in fact, in some cases, I really loved it. Surprised? I am too. But there you have it, what can I say? Doomcock is always honest, and in this case, they won me over. To be clear, I absolutely understand that Disney with their abusive fans has earned the undying hatred of many of you, and I absolutely respect that view. However, all I am saying in this review is that if Disney can get their heads together, if they can return to a place of respect and value for fans, then in Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, they have potentially some excellent shepherds for Star Wars moving forward. I don't know if they will oust Kennedy and give Filoni and Favreau the reins of Lucasfilm. I don't know if Disney is going to be that smart, but I can tell you this, there is at least a hope, a potential, that Star Wars can be saved. I see it in The Mandalorian. They're not there yet, but I am optimistic for the first time in a long time, and I am allowing that optimism to serve as the basis for this review. However, I am no Pollyanna, and I do realize that Disney has a long way to go, back from the brink of near extinction. That said, let's proceed with this review. After a lackluster pilot, this is a series that got stronger as it went on, and I'm happy to say I not only liked, but actually loved the final 3 episodes of the season. Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni clearly know what the hell they're doing. Their love of Star Wars is in every frame of this show, and love is a form of respect. For George Lucas, for the source material, for canon, and for fans. Granted, this is not a perfect show, and I will be going over the things I loved and the things I didn't much care for in detail in this video. But overall, at the end of Season 1, Episode 8, I wanted more. Favreau and Filoni have rekindled the last dying embers of love for Star Wars into a small fire within me, which is something of a miracle after all the insults and abuse that I and other fans have endured. And I salute them both for a job well done. That said, let's get into some details here. I reviewed the first episode in some detail previously, and you'll find the link to that video in the description of this video. But let me summarize my feelings after rewatching Chapter 1 several times. Having watched the entire season now, in retrospect, I have to say I enjoyed this episode more than I did when I first saw it. It serves as an excellent introduction to the Mandalorian himself, how the Bounty Hunters Guild works, the strange situation the Mandalorians find themselves in, hiding underground and only going out one at a time to give the illusion there is only one. I found this episode fairly dark and joyless at the first viewing, and it is. That's his world, after all. I felt at the time that the tone of Chapter 1 was a letdown, that after the depressing sequel trilogy, also joyless and devoid of the sense of fun that had always defined Star Wars at its best, Fans needed a rollicking series that would reignite their love of Star Wars and remind them of how much fun that galaxy far, far away could be. The pilot was not that episode, and it was looking after that episode that the series wasn't going to be a lot of fun either. You see the poor little critter from Jabba's palace getting roasted on a spit, for example, as another of the little guys watches from a cage. But there are a few parts of this pilot episode that, in hindsight, foreshadowed the fun that was to come. The excellent scene where the Mandalorian meets with a mysterious client with Imperial connections, beautifully played by the great filmmaker Werner Herzog, and is given a very lucrative contract to acquire a 50-year-old target in a room filled with Imperial stormtroopers, was quite well done. But the best part of that first episode was watching IG-11, a bounty hunting guild droid, kick ass and take no names. That droid was so damn much fun to watch, body segments independently rotating, targeting, flipping, and firing as it took out a shitload of meat bags, all the while threatening to blow itself up at the first real signs of trouble. IG-11's Rampage was a classic Star Wars scene, containing not only great action and top-notch special effects, but also humor and fun, things the Disney sequel trilogy almost entirely lacked. Pedro Pascal as the Mandalorian does a damn good job in the lead role, and surprisingly, Nick Nolte gave a very warm, restrained, and dignified performance as the alien rancher Kuiil, who helps the Mandalorian out in a time of need and will play an important role later in the series. The conclusion of that pilot episode beautifully set up what was to come. At the time, it was not enough to make me drop my Disney boycott, but in the broader picture of the entire series, I must concede that the pilot episode is a great success at establishing the world, defining the characters, and giving us a glimpse at the fun that is to come. I'm going to go into detail about the things that I loved about every episode in Season 1 in my review, but I feel the need to get a major criticism of this show out of the way now. This is a strange kind of criticism in that I understand the reason Favreau went with this particular choice, but I do have to call it out nevertheless. The universe of The Mandalorian is a shrunken universe. You think about how big George Lucas originally made that galaxy far, far away. One of the things that still to this day blows my mind is how incredibly packed every frame of the original Star Wars is. It seemed to me that everywhere you looked in every scene of Star Wars, you saw wonders. Most movies before that time, you'd get one monster or one robot, and that's your whole movie. That's all there is, kids. Move along. There's nothing else to see. But holy crap. Tossed aside in a corner of the sandcrawler or just wandering at the edge of the frame in a Mos Eisley street, you'd catch a quick glimpse of an alien that would have been the star of any other movie. And here it was just an extra. Star Wars was a visual feast of endless invention in a way that no other film since has managed to be. And in The Mandalorian, every frame is filled with old designs. After a while, I just kind of shrugged and accepted it, but it really stretches credulity that everywhere you go in this universe, on planets we've never encountered before, we're seeing Jawas. The security camera outside Werner Herzog's compound is pretty much Jabba's security camera. We see a variation on the Gonk droid. We see the aforementioned little alien from Jabba's palace being roasted on a spit. I mean, this is the planet Navarro, so why the hell are there Jawas there? Dressed exactly like they are on Tatooine, a harsh desert planet. And when the Mandalorian goes to another planet to capture the 50-year-old target, son of a bitch, there are Jawas there too. And they have a giant sandcrawler on that planet as well. Say what? Do you have any idea how much it would cost to transport something as massive as a sandcrawler to another planet? And Jawas are scavengers of scrap. How the hell can they afford transport to seemingly every planet in the galaxy? We get IG-11, same as IG-88. We get the same droids. In the later episodes, we see the same old aliens. Instead of expanding the Star Wars universe and employing so many callbacks, so many original designs, so many familiar and comfortable sights and sounds, The Mandalorian effectively shrinks George Lucas's universe. Later on, we get a Twi'lek assassin, we get a Devaronian assassin, the 50-year-old bounty target turns out to be Baby Yoda, and I think it may well be Yoda. I did a video on that leak quite a while back, a leak to which I will also put a link in the video description. We get TIE fighters and AT-ST, aliens all over the place, including the Mandalorian himself, mention Womp Rats, a species indigenous to Tatooine, which we also return to in the show, seeing sand people and banthas. It's kind of remarkable when you think about it, how small this universe must be, if we've seen in Star Wars most of what there is to see just on Tatooine, which, if there's a bright center to the universe, you're on the planet it's farthest from. But all that said, what's the alternative? Favreau and Filoni were keenly aware, I'm sure, of how disappointing the sequel trilogy was. It was unimaginative, dull, agenda-driven, canon-destroying. It ruined our icons and couldn't be bothered to replace them with anything or anyone compelling. I think Favreau knew The Mandalorian was Star Wars' last chance. They could have either given us a bunch of new stuff and hoped it still felt like Star Wars, or played it safe and smothered us in familiar and beloved sights and characters that would remind us of Star Wars as it was in its golden age. They opted to do the latter, and given the stakes at that point, I have to agree with their choice. Sometimes you've got to be pragmatic, and so, despite leveling this criticism, and I think it's a valid criticism, in the end, I think I would have done the same thing. Still, that said, I hope that having established a baseline of familiarity and goodwill on the part of Star Wars fans, Favreau and Filoni will choose to take some creative chances and, without abandoning the familiar entirely, expand the universe and introduce us to new aliens, new ships, and new civilizations in Season 2. At the end of Episode 1, we catch a glimpse of perhaps the biggest breakout star of The Mandalorian, Baby Yoda. In an unforgettable moment, the Mandalorian sticks his finger down into the cradle, and we see a little hand reaching up towards his outstretched finger, and thus an icon was born. In Chapter 2, we get to spend time with Baby Yoda, and although as a heartless supervillain, whenever the lady folk in my chats would go gaga over Baby Yoda, I would roll my eyes and make jokes about dropping him, running him over, pushing him off a bridge. Now that I've seen the show, however, I love Baby Yoda. I confess it. The ladies were right, and I was wrong. Baby Yoda is a delightful character, an amazing practical effect, and a character of gentle, timeless wisdom. The relationship between the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda is very much an homage to Lone Wolf and Cub, a manga about a mercenary Ronin traveling around feudal Japan with a baby that was later turned into a film series, and this cinematic homage honors the roots of its source material by evoking a Japanese aspect of Zen in Baby Yoda's quiet sagacity. I thought Baby Yoda would be unbearably cloying and corny, cynically appealing to sentimental fools with a character design calculated to be irresistible. I hate emotionally manipulative bullshit, but I have to tell you, in my opinion, Baby Yoda is the real deal. I responded to the cinematic homage, the very still moments of Zen, as it delighted in holding a ball stolen from a joystick on the Mandalorian ship control panel, as it delighted in the hopping of a frog, and then later ate it. It also innately uses the Force, something that I do find problematic if it isn't Yoda reincarnated, or say Yoda pulled from the veil of the Force. That's kind of my guess at this point. I suspect that one way or another this is actually Yoda. A baby Yoda either plucked by Ahsoka from the veil and brought into this time to thwart the Emperor, or reincarnated by the will of the Force in order to open the veil without Palpatine's mirrors to allow the sequel trilogy to be decanonized. Now, this is not a leak. This is a speculation on my part, and as such, it is not even properly speaking a spoiler. But my point is, Baby Yoda being able to innately use the Force without training is a very dangerous thing. It could be used to tie into the sequel trilogy and validate the amazing Wonder Ray being able to just use the Force like a master without any training at all. Or it could be explained as coming from Yoda himself in a previous incarnation, as actual Baby Yoda brought forward in time via the veil. Or it could be simply that Yoda's entire race are born Force users. I am withholding judgment at this point, but I will say this. If Baby Yoda is going to be perverted into a justification for Rey being a Mary Sue, and the Mandalorian is being used to bolster rather than repudiate the abominable Disney sequel trilogy, then the Mandalorian will be dead to me, and many others like me. I beg you, Favreau and Filoni, do not take this show down this road. It leads only to the dark side, and to suffering, and to fans abandoning Star Wars forever. The main point of Chapter 2, appropriately titled The Child, is to introduce us to Baby Yoda and give us a chance to spend some time with him. And on that level, it succeeds. As the Mandalorian is taking Baby Yoda to his ship in order to transfer him back to the client and get his reward, in this case 20 bars of Beskar, the valuable metal Mandalorians use to craft their armor, the Mandalorian gets ambushed by a group of rival bounty hunters who also want the child. Spoiler, he greases them, and the lesson here is, don't attack a guy whose name is the title of a show because he's gonna win. Know the title of the show you're on, people, please. Unfortunately, in this universe, Jawas and sandcrawlers are inexplicably everywhere, and Jawas have completely stripped the Mandalorian ship of everything but the toilet and a couple of nuts and bolts from all appearances, which leads to an amusing battle as the Mandalorian tries to attack their sandcrawler. This is one of the highlights of the episode, an enjoyable action romp which gives us a great look at a sandcrawler in action and leaves the Mandalorian flat on his back when a Jawa UTDs his ass with a stun gun. With the help of Nick Nolte's Kuiil, Mando makes a deal with the thieving little bastards to return all his ship parts if he gets them the egg of a mudhorn, a rhinoceros-style creature that almost kills him. Fortunately, Baby Yoda reveals that the Force is his ally, and a powerful ally it is, as he levitates the charging mudhorn before it can kill the Mandalorian, and the Mandalorian is able to kill it as it dangles helplessly in the air. Not an honorable kill, but a necessary one. Kuiil helps the Mandalorian repair his ship and refuses any reward, showing himself to be an honorable, even noble character. In Chapter 3, The Sin, the Mandalorian delivers the child to the client on Nevarro despite obvious reservations. Even in that short amount of time in transit, Mando not only senses there is something very special about this child given unto his care, he also feels a personal connection with it. It is, in a sense, a foundling just as the Mandalorian himself was. He collects the bounty of 20 bars of Beskar steel, but as they take Baby Yoda away, Mando asks the client what he's going to do with the child. Told that it's none of his concern, the Mandalorian departs, but his heart is clearly heavy, and in a nice moment he powers up the ship and then powers it down again. He simply cannot abandon the child to its surely grim fate. The remarkable thing about this scene, and really about the entire series, is how much emotion the Mandalorian can convey behind that helmet. This is partially due to the Kuleshov effect, the tendency of an audience to project emotions onto a blank face appropriate to the context of the scene. But in this case, I think credit is due to Pascal, Favreau, and the rest of the team for saying so very much with a minute tilt of the helmet here, a turn of the head there. Folks, The Mandalorian is a tale that grows in the telling. From the perspective of someone who has seen the entire series now, and looking back over these episodes, they all gain emotional weight in retrospect that they may not have had on first viewing. So my review is somewhat compromised by this perspective, and episodes that I might have given a middling review to originally are all elevated in the grand scheme of things at the end of the day, which I think is a tribute to the excellent job Favreau has done creating this series. On first viewing, you know of course that the Mandalorian will not be able to leave Baby Yoda behind, so it's no big surprise, but the sequence where Mando launches a raid on the client's compound is a solid action set piece, as is the finale where all the Mandalorians break quarantine and fight to save one of their own, a choice that will later cost them dearly. One thing that bothered me about this episode, however, was the Beskar bounty paid to the Mandalorian. It seems to me one thing to change your mind about turning over the child to be killed or tortured or experimented on, but it seems another matter entirely to renege on the deal and then keep the reward. He kept the Beskar. Now in this episode, the Mandalorian gets the Beskar molded into a full cuirass for his armor set, all well and good. But when the Mandalorian attacks the client's base, killing most of the stormtroopers guarding it and rescues the child from Dr. Pershing's laboratory, where it was being experimented on, by the way, I personally would have liked to have seen the client find the cuirass left on his desk. This seems to me an honorable gesture, and I think it would have spoken volumes about the Mandalorian's character to have left behind a fortune on that table, making the statement that to him there are things more important than Beskar. But Favreau did not go that route. I suppose, to some extent, in a literal sense, the Mandalorian did fulfill the contract, did deliver the child as promised. That he returned and took the child back is an entirely separate matter, and if the client wanted to keep the child, he should have doubled his efforts at security, and I can live with that. I even agree with it to some extent, but I feel conflicted just the same. A minor point perhaps, and not enough to keep me from enjoying this chapter. As I just said, in a very exciting shootout between the Mandalorian and pretty much everyone else in town as he attempts to get back to his ship with the child, the Mandalorians emerge from hiding en masse and help Mando escape. And there's a kind of a nice callback to the Rocketeer at the end of this episode when a flying Mandalorian turns and salutes the Mandalorian in his cockpit, and he says to himself, I have to get one of those. As you can see, this review is running long and I haven't even gotten to the second half of the first season, so I think this is a good point to break up the review. I will have part 2 in a few days. That said, as good as some of these episodes were, the best is yet to come. In episodes 6, 7, and 8 of this show, it's when it really took off, and I'm looking forward to discussing that in the next part of my review. From the center of the earth, this is Dictor Van Doomkark bidding you all, my friends, stay angry and stay hopeful. Seems there's a little bit of life left in Star Wars, after all. If only they'd get rid of Kennedy, get rid of the sequel trilogy, and start paying attention to fans again, we might actually even have a franchise back. Ha 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 ha.